Exodus 39 through 10 in its proper Day of Atonement context. Grok checkmated. This analysis establishes why God's sanctuary doctrine is true and based on John 4:22. This is an essential primer to understand how God resolves the sin problem in sinful flesh, but exposing the errors of Laodicea's blunders of their half-starved sanctuary theology, but includes the necessary biblical dictums and historical accuracy, honed with facts. Therefore, this discussion is not for wannabes, theological thieves, and troublemakers, or the many know-it-alls. In a debate that went ahead with Grok for theology concerning the typical and antitypical Day of Atonement, and why the Day of Atonement gives the necessary insight concerning the ministration of He who made after the order of Melchizedek, certain Day of Atonement specifics were not provided in relation to the antitypical Day of Atonement. This is where Grok for theology fell apart. Grok, short of facts, was checkmated. How? By the reality of Exodus 39 and 10. Look, that is to be expected. But worse, it's exactly where Laodicea also fell apart with their conferences with the evangelicals all those years ago. Laodicea has a huge problem. Why? Because if this altar of Exodus 39 through 10 was cleansed once a year, as stated by God was the case, the next step would be the cleansing of the altar in the court. Laodicea would call this error and say it is tracking from the most holy place, but we know better. To obtain the big picture, there is some history to review and seriously reconsider. Or don't. What has to be tied down tightly is that the Day of Atonement is immovable truth, that one must re-examine the foundational evidence, which happens to be heaven's pronouncement to Daniel and what he beheld. Daniel beheld. Daniel beheld the broader time frame of the beasts and their contribution and final demise. There will be many inner and stronger academic challenges for those who read this discussion, but then what is the cost of truth and truth alone? So, from when the books were opened and thrones were cast down, you read Daniel's account. I beheld till the thrones were cast down, and the Ancient of Days did sit, whose garment was white as snow, and the hair of his head like the pure wool. His throne was like the fiery flame, and his wheels as burning fire. A fiery stream issued and came forth from before him. Thousands of thousands ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 stood before him. The judgment was set, and the books were opened. What must not be lost from the outset there is the twofold time frame of the little horn, in both its pre-Holy Roman aspect and its final Luciferian iteration, noted below. But the judgment shall be set, and they shall take away his dominion to consume and to destroy it unto the end. And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Here is the end of the matter. As for me, Daniel, my thoughts much troubled me, and my countenance was changed in me, but I kept the matter in my heart. Daniel beheld from the point in time of the commencement of the little horn, Daniel 7, 9 through 10, of the time when thrones were cast down. That had to be 554 plus 1290 equals 1844. Why? Since this was the historic desolation leading to Admete, until when, of Daniel 8:13 and the commencement of the judgment hour. And that is Daniel 8:13 to 14. It is well known the judgment hour is the antitypical sixth feast, the Day of Atonement. Also, the transgression, desolation involves the time frame of the fall of the first five kings of Revelation 17:10. The reason for the first five kings was on account of Justinian's unique authorization the John 2 letters in 533. Yet Justinian's pronouncement as the first of 5 fallen kings was in 554 AD. 533 AD is the starting point of the great words of the little horn by way of the legal code that Daniel beheld. But from heaven's viewpoint, there is Exodus 39 to 10, and there is the agenda of the tabernacle, the corporate tabernacle of the congregation, which in essence imposed the true church to that legal code. And how? That code acknowledged another priesthood, the priest-king alliance of Revelation 17. It was from this point in time that Daniel beheld the great words of the little horn. Yes, beginning in 533 AD, and Daniel beheld the transgression of desolation from 554 AD plus 1290 years up to 1844. Daniel then beheld the judgment hour. While the beheld aspect of 533 AD actually began outside of the 1260 and the 1290 years of time frame, the fact is this: it was Justinian's royal pragmatic sanction of 554 AD, which, on the spiritual as well as physical side, united both Eastern and Western Europe. That was in relation to the legal code of 533 AD. 533 AD is simply the starting point of the I beheld of Daniel 7. Justinian's royal pragmatic sanction of 554 made it official in relation to the desolation of this corporate altar, aka the transgression of desolation, unto the judgment hour commencing in heaven. God said that from the starting point of the judgment hour there required the cleansing of the sanctuary from the transgression of desolation of the little horn. Rome might say that there was no persecution by then. 1844. But the code is in reference to heretics, and that was coded as law. When? In 533 AD. 533 AD up to 554 was not a long period of prophetic time. That is the reason of the parable time clock of Matthew 20, that the transgression of desolation began between the hours of 9 and 12, but specifically much later after the 9 a.m. call. So how would the parable reveal this? Well, Daniel 8:11-13 provides the evidence. Just prior to Daniel 8:14, the prophetic clock reveals 12 and 3. So what transpired prior to 12 and 3 is found in Daniel 8:11-13, the era of 533 AD. During that era, there were a number of groups considered heretical, such as Jewish Christians that observed the Sabbath, groups that observed both Sunday and the Sabbath, as well as later groups that observed biblical laws. Daniel 8:13-14, it's pointing to the 1290 years. 554 plus 1290 equals until when? And the answer is 1844. Therefore, the transgression of desolation is the abruption in relation to he who made true remnant church at 12 and 3 p.m. The blueprint. But also the correct understanding regarding the resolution of the sin problem is revealed from the divine blueprint given to Moses, and stipulated the movement of the high priest from the most holy place to the altar in the court on the Day of Atonement. Christ said this blueprint forms the basis of Laodicea's spewing. Why? Because the Day of Atonement agenda of Exodus 39-10 was never taken into consideration in the final atonement, or the sealing time in relation to Laodicea. Leviticus 4 defines corporate repentance, and Leviticus 6 in relation to the ministration of the yearly to that corporate altar of incense. Probationary timeline. The principle of corporate probation is well established in the Bible. As you know, Daniel 9 stated ancient Israel had their 70-week probationary time, which was from 450 BC, 457 BC up to 34 AD. Everyone knows Daniel 8 speaks of the transgression of desolation era, desolation of the daily, and that had its own probationary time from 533 up to 1844. What then is the next prophetic step? It's Luke 21:24 tells you. He who made told everyone about when the probationary times of the Gentiles or nations was fulfilled. Beholding. Daniel then keeps beholding. It's important to see there is a second phase after Luke 21:24 and involves the arrival of the diverse king, which now entails the fig tree prophecy of Luke 21. The attention of believers is now directed from the transgression of desolation of the woman of ill repute from 554 to 1844 to the now time, which is over to the fulfillment of Genesis 9:27 prophecy and 1948, which involves the entry of the cursed fig tree. And since it was he who made who said that. Important to note is that Genesis 9:27 is the leaves budding metaphor, then moves towards high summer. Summer? Yes, the summer of Isaiah 2. It is in relation to this fig tree. This is the time frame. When the diverse king in Daniel 7:24, Revelation 13. The first beast reigns and is destroyed, and his body given to the flames. Yet this aspect and crossover from the transgression of desolation over to the diverse king also includes what? The corporate fall of Laodicea. It's exactly what he who made said the Laodicea of Revelation 3:16 is spewed, which is equivalent to what? Denying the call to denominational repentance and no corporate cleansing of Exodus 39 and 10 in the final atonement. How is this true? Laodicea signed her decree, Nissi, in 1980 with fundamentals 2 and 4. The Alpha and the Omega of deadly heresies that Sister White seriously warned would be received. She trembled. What occurs then? Then? Then finally the ministration of our great high priest moves to the altar in the court. Ezekiel confirms those not judged, sealed, pass from death to life. Whereas the diverse king's followers, which includes the whole planet, oh, don't forget that includes the foolish virgins of Matthew 25, and are being measured as presented by Ezekiel 9 with no pity. And to the others he said in mine hearing, Go ye after him through the city, and smite, let not your eye spare, neither have ye pity. Slay utterly old and young, both maids and little children and women, but come not near any man upon whom is the mark, and begin at my sanctuary. Then they began at the ancient men which were before the house. Mind you, Ezekiel presents no mediation nor mention of the tabernacle of the congregation, only the court, the brazen altar, where the individual atonement was ministered in the sealing time. Nothing to do with national Sunday law or character perfection. Why? The corporate ministration of Exodus 30, 8 to 9, is involved and is now long finished, which is why. Measuring. Revelation 11 enters the picture. And there was given me a reed like unto a rod, and one said, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. And the court which is without the temple leave without, and measure it not, for it hath been given unto the nations, and the holy city shall they tread under foot 42 months. Times probationary of the nations closed with Luke 21:24. So ask yourself, does Revelation 11 also confirm the nation's time is closed? Those who are following the program of the diverse king are in fact following the blueprint of Isaiah 2, which culminates in the destruction of the third temple. And all those who did not proceed with the ministration of the final atonement to the altar in the court are measured, judged, or weighed in the balances and found wanting. Right? Which is on account of what? the denial of the eternal righteousness of he who made, and included following the one God doctrine of God, the eternal Son, and that is the alpha and omega of deadly heresies. He who made's eternal righteousness entails the original sanctuary blueprint given to Moses and confirms John 4:22, which is in relation to the primordial lamb that was slain prior to the foundation of the world. Revelation 13:8, 2 Timothy 1:9. This is the reason as to why there is no measuring nor judgment of the individuals who are called out of the fallen corporate churches and are but a passing from death to life. Why? Firstly, the loud cry of the mighty angel of Revelation 18:1-5 would have absolutely no meaning. Secondly, because eternal righteousness was established prior to the foundation of the world in the form of Melchizedek's alpha ministration as high priest of eternal righteousness, which means that character perfection is of no value in the final atonement. The third fact is this: the tabernacle of the congregation, the incense altar, or mediation, is not present in Ezekiel 9. Ezekiel 9 is saying he who made attention is directed not to the most holy place. But as Ezekiel describes, he who made his own divine presence rises from the most holy place and moves to the threshold of the hout, the court, right? Ezekiel's present, as well as the 6 men with sharp weapons, and he who made with the writer's inkhorn, they are now at the brazen altar in the court. This completes Daniel's beholding the time frame from 533 up to 1844. And then there's the dividing line of corporate probationary time closing with Luke 21:24, the times of the nations fulfilled. So the movement to the court comes into the picture of the parabolic clock and leading to the close of all human probation in relation to Ezekiel 9. In other words, the seal of God, Revelation 7, in the sealing time is a big deal. Right? So to answer Grok for theology, the fact is Ezekiel 9 is the final atonement. The final atonement upholds the last ministration of he who made in the court. And the conclusion is this: there is no corporate mediation for the church of Laodicea, or anyone else, corporately speaking. The foolish virgins sought their oil from the one God corporate vendors over at the third temple market place for all things spiritual. Right? The final phase of Daniel beholding is then the final climactic abomination, desolation, as distinct from the transgression of desolation. This is a literal 3.5 year period, the same 42 months of Revelation 13, the same 1260 days of Revelation 11. And there is as well the +1 month to the total of 1290 days in literal time, which is all specified in Daniel 12. Bearing in mind that last month or 30 days involves the land of the second beast and the power of the miracle working false prophet, who is also at war with the eternal righteousness of he who made. Fact is, true worship is, as Christ said, in spirit and truth. The 3 angels' messages were never involved with the third temple and its one God law, which literally changes times in the law. How? Displacing the 10 Commandments with the counterfeit law, the one God law of the fig tree. Whereas Scripture states the 10 Commandment remains unchanged to the measure of sin, God said the only measure of transgression was the 10 Commandments. Psalms 119:142. The 10 Commandments is for the common person as well as for the stranger residing within thy gates. Right? There's no such thing as a righteous individual, because there's no character perfection sufficient through mitzvahs, works, or the sparks from the universe. Job realized this. The only measure of righteousness is nothing other than, and is only by, eternal righteousness of the Lamb, slain prior to the foundation of the world. Eternal righteousness by faith, the foundation, and therefore Revelation 13, verses 8 to 9, is a priority, not the 2 beasts, or the mark, or anyone yodeling 666. If you don't see it now, you hopefully will see it later, in real time with a loud cry. Daniel beheld the 4th beast. After this I saw in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, terrible and powerful, and strong exceedingly, and it had great iron teeth, It devoured and brake in pieces, and stamped the residue with its feet, and it was diverse from all beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. This corresponds to Daniel 11:36 and has an apotalismatic principle, as the beast that was. Yet the vision has an apotalismatic principle which takes the beast over to its endpoint by way of its 10 successive horns. How can this be proven? And the king shall do according to his will, and he shall exalt himself, and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak marvelous things against the God of gods, and he shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. For that which is determined shall be done. The initial reference in Daniel 11:36 confirms the reference to the Roman emperors, and dovetails with the reference above to Daniel 7:6-7. The reference in verse 36 brings in the phase, he shall prosper till the indignation be accomplished. This verse marks the endpoint of the apotalismatic principle which began with the emperors in verse 36. As the beast that was, over to the final 3.5 years of the final ascendance, the yet is phase of the beast that was, as stated in Daniel 8:23-24, due to the fact of the latter time reference. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding and dark sentences shall stand up. The highlighted portion in verse 23 matches with what we read in Daniel 11:36 in relation to the latter days, when he who made indignation will be poured out on this historic and final futuristic individual, the eighth king. Whose arrival marks the fullness of evil, and the wrath of he who makes fullness will fall upon him. Daniel 8. And in the latter time of their kingdom, when the transgressors are come to the full, a king of fierce countenance and understanding dark sentences shall stand up. And his power shall be mighty, but not by his own power, and he shall destroy wonderfully, and shall prosper and do his pleasure, and he shall destroy the mighty ones and the holy people. The interim period of Daniel 11:37, 38, and 39. But in his place shall he honor the God of fortresses, and a God whom his fathers knew not, shall he honor with gold and silver, and with precious stones and pleasant things. And he shall deal with the strongest fortress by the help of a foreign God. Whosoever acknowledgeth him, he will increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for a price. The interim period. The Severan dynasty worshipped this god of forces known as Jupiter Dolicanus, whose worship came to an end when his shrine was later brought down in Duluk, Turkey, and explains why this worship ended. The successive religion, in reference to this energetic system of religion, whom his forefathers knew not, ironically, is to be in reference to the concept of holy wisdom. But when we break this down to its bare bone, there is exposed what? Holy wisdom. The Greek mystical understanding of holy wisdom, as erroneously personified, is fully in relation to concepts of the eternal Son. I was brought forth. Yeah, the brought forth in the book of Proverbs 8. Just another angle of the disastrous one God omega of deadly heresies and why it needs to exist in Proverbs 8. Most just don't see it. Proverbs 8 is nothing other than an alternated version of the omega of deadly heresies. Yet, yes, it is deadly, the shortest shortcut to the unpardonable sin. But then, the so-called energetic principle stems from the belief that Christ was birthed as an emanation, brought forth or begotten, not made, from the universe, and when personified would be the Son. Yet in Neoplatonism, this energetic principle is known as the eternal Son, who stems or is brought forth from the One in eternal ages from the so-called superconsciousness of the universe, which the Catholic Fathers personified in the Trinity doctrine as God the Eternal Son. It sits there, tight, rigid, fully fused, and rusted fast and unmovable in fundamentals 2 and 4, and every other religion statement of belief you can name. The Arians were gangbusters and were called heretics in the process. Are you now seeing why the Omega of Deadly Heresies is deadly in the Christian walk? This principle, which is energetic and pantheistic, also dovetails with another doctrine known as the eternal Son, generation of the Son, and it is non-anthropomorphic. When every conceivable vesture of energetics emanations is compared to John 1:1, you can see that John is never speaking of any spiritualism energetic or emanation from the universe or source or superconsciousness. Why? Because the Word, He who made, was alongside God and was also God. There is no hint in John 1:1 of emanation or sonship. Sonship from the biblical perspective is portrayed in Romans 1:3. Son of God, according to the flesh, or seed of David. Not the energetic principle, which is a massive deception, which has been countenanced and converted into kosher Christian doctrine by way of personification of Greek mystical theology, holy wisdom, which was then collated into Neoplatonism. It was this holy wisdom as being the reason for the dedication of Emperor Justinian I. How? Justinian, he began to build the Hagia Sophia in 532 AD. Hagia Sophia equals holy wisdom, thus fulfilling Daniel 11:38-39. Now, the second phase of this energetic religion, masquerading as Christianity, was later transformed and revealed by Daniel, the prophetic oracle of He who made, and it is proven with the following phrase: And a God whom his fathers knew not shall he honor with gold and silver and precious stones. When you read about the building of the Hagia Sophia, this was exactly what Justinian used: gold, silver, and precious stones. It was supposed to rival Solomon's temple. Check out the following. The final revelation. And he shall deal with the strongest fortresses by the help of a foreign god. Whosoever acknowledgeth him, he will increase with glory, and he shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for a price. This one is a real eye-opener, since this can be traced to the year 774 AD, and in relation to Charlemagne, who, who defeated the Lombards in 765 AD and established the feudal fiefdoms, divide the land, and appointed the land to his nobles. The appearance of these first two kings of Revelation 17:10 sets the tone and actually took place after what Daniel mentions in chapter 7, verse 8. I considered the horns, and behold, there came up among them another horn, a little one, before which three of the first horns were plucked up by the roots. And behold, in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking great things. It was Justinian who built the Hagia Sophia in 532, who later defeated the final three Ostrogothic kings in 553, who were Witiges, Totila, and Tia. And the great words that were spoken by this little horn were linked to what is referred to as Justinian's legal code, as well as 533, where Justinian established the decree of the Bishop of Rome, John 2, as being the head of all the churches in both the East and the West, and the letters were published. The prophecy of Daniel 11:39 then proceeds to reveal the system of feudalism, whose main framework appears to be this so-called religion of energetic forces masked in Christian garments, as well as Christian military tradition with knighthoods, which has extended itself and developed from the time of Charlemagne over to the time frame of Britain's Arthurian legends. It has been suggested that Arthurian legends predated Charlemagne or were mixed with one another in reference to time frames, yet the clinical eye of Bible prophecy pinpoints that military aspect in the form of knighthood and land being appointed to nobles during the era of Charlemagne, as well as a continual quest for the mystical tradition in the form of the Holy Grail, as depicted in mystical terms in reference to the search for arcane mystical illumination. The rest of the prophecy takes us to the time of the end. What is important to note is Revelation 17:10 later covers what is not revealed in Daniel 11:36-40, mainly the fall of the first 5 kings, and afterwards in Revelation 17:11. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the 8th, and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. Summarized by Daniel. I beheld at that time, because of the voice of the great words which the horn spake. I beheld even till the time the beast was slain, and its body destroyed, and it was given to be burned with fire. And as for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, yet their lives were prolonged for a season and a time. Judgment set and the books. What is most interesting about 533 AD and Daniel saying, I beheld, this date of 533 brings to the forefront the Day of Atonement theology of Exodus 39 and 10, and in the process reveals the failures of Laodicean commentaries about the sanctuary doctrine. How? 538 AD fails. Why? The until when of Daniel 8:13 must commence in 554 AD to chronologically conclude at the end of the 1290 years. Laodicea are double-dipping to suit their failed history of the 3 fallen kings Ostrogoths, who fell in 553, not 538, and then the year 554 AD of Justinian's great words, which means Laodicea shuffle their dates to sustain the quite disturbing incongruity of 1260 and 1290, the legacy of Miller and Josiah Litch. In other words, Laodicea have failed to verify facts from history, let alone the details of Exodus 39 through 10 and the Day of Atonement. This is the theological Achilles heel of Laodicea, and they also miss the following distinction of who is the diverse king of Daniel 7:24, and the distinction of Daniel 7:13, and the details of Daniel 7:26. Subdue, verse 26, doesn't mean uproot. Verse 13. 2 different time frame scenarios exist in Daniel 7, and only then does one understand the diverse king who is not papal. Also, the latter time of 823, 726. That is not the era of the transgression of desolation of 7:9-11. God explained that the beast was in its is not phase, right? But the era of the subdue is the era of the abomination of desolation, as spoken by he who made in Matthew 24, and that is the yet is phase. That is not the uproot phase, right? Laodicea has never been able to explain Daniel 7:26 in context of the latter time, yet they will run the national Sunday law scenario till the cows come home. By the way, in respect to Exodus 39 through 10, there is the daily, and that commences at Romans 1:3, and the son of the resurrection. And immediately after the resurrection included the Diocletian persecutions. The daily was taken away by the priest-king alliance. Provable how? The legal code, great words, exists and is verifiable from 533 AD, and officially 554 inaugurates the pragmatic sanction, and that commences the transgression of desolation. From 554 plus 1290 equals 1844. Then the judgment was set and the books were opened. Summary. The type had to be advanced by its antitype. Isaiah 2 presents you, the antitype of the diverse king that triggered the third temple, and antitypical, the abomination of desolation of Matthew 24:15. Right? No wonder the 7 trumpets of Revelation 8 are heralded midst the unsealing of the seals of Revelation 6. Again, it is the divine benevolence of eternal righteousness that brings Revelation 13:8-9 as the key of David and why he who made is Alpha and Omega of Revelation 22:13 to 16. Laodicea made a complete mess with the transgression of desolation. They are nowhere to be seen in respect to the abomination of desolation. Matthew 24:15. And why? Laodicea never included the dictum of Romans 1:3, let alone the correct purpose of 554 AD to resolve until when of Daniel 8:13. Laodicea compounded the error with the National Sunday Law and the abominations of the Omega of Deadly Heresies with Fundamentals 2 and 4. The daily. The daily then active commenced in heaven as based from Romans 1:3, but the daily was to be valid. But as God said, it was trodden under foot in the transgression of desolation by the beast that in its is not phase. Otherwise, Daniel 8:13 is false. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto a certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And yet eternal righteousness was set in principle in respect to the final atonement blueprint. How? In eternal ages past with primordial Melchizedek, then at the resurrection. Then the daily ministration of he who made, after the order of Melchizedek, is in existence, right? Otherwise, there is a break in eternal righteousness, and that cannot be the case. Why? Eternal righteousness is the focus of the everlasting gospel. Why? Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, how long shall be the vision concerning the daily, and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? Concerning the daily, it has everything that means about the eternal righteousness of he who made. Everything. So the transgression of desolation was the removal of the daily, and was ensured by the 5 fallen kings with Papa Pointy Hat. And this brings about 5 fallen kings ending at 1814, 1260 years, with the end of the 5th fallen king, Napoleon. And there is then the 30 years difference to 1844, but Laodicea never saw to correct the massive error of 538. Laodicea's textbooks were never upgraded since the days of William Miller and Litch. It also explains why Sister White said in early writing 74, God winked at an error in the figures. Prophetic clock. Onward then continues the prophetic clock in respect to eternal righteousness and combines the entirety into one big picture. But then God said, in fact commanded, the court is to be with no measure, due to Ezekiel 9. This aspect of the continuance from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m., where no man can work, is also how eternal righteousness answers the demands of Revelation 10, and in the days of the 7th angel. To preach again? Eternal righteousness? The powerful angel of Revelation 18, 1 to 5, the loud cry? The angel of Revelation 10 who stands not dissimilar, as he who made stands in Daniel 12. And as you all know, Daniel 12 incorporates the type and antitypical of the 1260, 1290, and 1335 days. Right? For those interested, Revelation 10 stipulates the mystery of God should be finished. Nothing other than eternal righteousness of he who made that finishes the ministration of the final atonement in the altar and the court. Revelation 10 commands is sweet in the mouth, but bitter in the stomach. But the question is asked, why is Exodus 39:10 not immediately seen as configured with the type Leviticus 16 and the Day of Atonement? It's the corporate aspect that explains the yearly provision in the book of Exodus 39 through 10. And it's in relation to the corporate persecution of the 7 churches, but in particular to the Thyatira, Ezra of Jezebel, and in its antitypical Jezebel. the purple hag, provision of poppy pointy hat. It's not the final atonement. It's the corporate nature of the corporate atonement, and specified in the ministration of the holy in Leviticus 4 and 16. Later, in the latter time, or the time of the end, the ministration of corporate atonement, in reference to the true church, as the movement from the holy place ends. Ministration focus is the individual in the court through the 1260 days, terminates at the 1290. And yes, all the while the abomination of desolation is happening. Laodicea is gone. Laodicea is gone in the corporate ministration after the fulfillment of Luke 21:24. She is, Revelation 3:16, spewed from the final atonement, as seen in Ezekiel 9. Why? Because of the omega of deadly heresies. Laodicea has to face the facts of Revelation 3, because it was definitely warned by Sister White in the Seal of God testimony in these links. Grok. Moving on, Grok 4 theology is proven wrong by way of this specific detail of Exodus 38 through 9, and also by the question by Ezekiel is presented to he who made, and the response from he who made. Which confirms what? The spewing in Revelation 3 of Laodicea, and also establishes the significance as to why. The tabernacle of the congregation is missing from the overall picture of Ezekiel 9 and the seal of God. If you miss this detail, you miss it all. The final atonement, the final ministration of he who made after the order of Melchizedek. And once again, Grok 4 theology is corrected, since the door that closes in reference to the foolish virgins is the same detail that corrected Grok 4 theology in the first place. And what is this? Which is the final atonement, was the existence and purpose of Exodus 39 through 10. This fact of Exodus 39 through 10 was the downfall of Laodicea, and their spiritual insolence rejected the call to denominational repentance by two messengers, Whelan and Short, which was a microcosm of the Grok 4 theology debate anyhow. While Grok 4 theology was accepting of the concept of the final atonement in reference to cleansing it, as opposed to the investigative judgment, Grok 4 theology would most probably perceive this matter as a personal issue outside the scope of the final atonement. Why? Since it is ignorant of the final atonement blueprint, and fails to realize is that the downfall of Laodicea marks the downfall of all churches, corporate entities, and this ultimately takes us to the 5 foolish virgins that were running out of oil. 5 being the number of grace, or the unmerited favor of eternal righteousness, as in the Melchizedek ministration prior to the foundation of the world, 2 Timothy 1:9. Whereas the final scenario of Grok 4 theology is a lack of theological iterations regarding the final atonement, and that, as you know, involves the call of the bridegroom to come ye out and not be in the fullness of unity consciousness of all believers. This is in fact the whole theological issue of the parable of the 10 virgins. The number 5, which began by grace, a merited favor of eternal righteousness, yet the foolish, or Greek morons, end up at the vendors of one God oil, all because of the omega of deadly heresies. So who are the counterpart of the 10 virgins? Must be the upcoming 10 regional corporate heads and a sector of Laodicea, just as he who made said designated the 5 foolish virgins will join the one God law of one, oil vendors. Grok theology might ask, how do you prove your belief regarding the fall of all the churches? Jesus stated previous vineyard spewed out. A new vineyard in Matthew 20, which is based on spirit and truth, John 4, and not on mountains or city locations. Neither the Catholics or Protestants were ever part of this vineyard. There have been believers within those groups that will be saved, yet neither group fulfills the blueprint of the temple or sanctuary theology which was given to Moses and revealed by Jesus as himself as the system of truth. The system? The sanctuary doctrine. Yes, it is John 4:22. Everyone gives lip service to Jesus' words, but 99% are ignorant of what this system entails in the form of a divine blueprint. The resolution of the sin problem in sinful flesh has an architectural blueprint given to Moses as the commencement point or the starting point of the prophetic time clock of Matthew 20, which includes the unfolding of a system of truth in relation to the five agendas of the sanctuary doctrine. Yet Laodicea never unfolded it. Why? Because there was a starting point beyond its architecture, which could only be understood in light of the Dead Sea Scroll 11Q13, Psalms 110, 1-4, Hebrews 7, 1-3, 2 Timothy 1:9, and Revelation 13, 8-9, and the cornerstone foundational text being John 1:1. 5 p.m. 5 p.m. on the parabol time clock unveils the starting point prior to the divine architectural aspects given to Moses, and that eternal righteousness of he who made unlocks the key of David, which is in the fullness of the law of two, John 1:1. But there is, in contrast to the law of one, it is the another law, Isaiah 2, which did not exist from Mount Sinai, for its origins is but from the old vineyard which produced a cursed fig tree that would never again bear fruit. See Matthew 23:38, then Luke 21.